Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of the Running Mech, a Lancer battle report series where I put the players against the NPC. In this episode, let's talk about Eidolon. So, you can probably tell how much I give a shit on maintaining canonicality on Lancer for the series at this point. All are fair under the Martian polar ice after all. Before I talk about this session, I would like to thank SGT Briar, Akirio, Digital Iron, and Hydronin for participating in the session. Anyway, with Eidolon coming out in No Room for Wallflower, of course I'm going to have an episode about them. If you don't know what an Eidolon is, basically it's a special NPC boss type consisting of multiple pre-made layers for the players to figure out and puzzle their way out. Every layer has a gimmick of their own, so to speak. And, well, I have no idea what's going to happen when I run the session. I practically went in with zero expectations, so everything happened was a surprise to me too. For this session, the player will be battling a triple layered Eidolon. They will also be elevated to license level 9 because, well, I can. They will still be following the single session limit rules I have set so far, however, just to make sure the players don't bum rush the Eidolon. And to keep the mystery for you guys, I will not be naming what layers I have used for the Eidolon. You guys can try to guess it on your own. Anyway, let's start off with round 1. Laplace quickly popped Swallowtail's core power, Prophetic Interjection, to protect their allies and followed the first step to deal with an Eidolon, by scanning it. Then they just climbed onto Sentinel onto Eternity's back. Kugaza did nothing on her turn. The Tsugamori just laughed. Fucking ominous.
Also, you spelled their name wrong.
Then what the hell is a Tsugamori? I want to watch the movie more than I thought apparently. Anyway, Sentinel unto Eternity then raised up their Argonaut shield on Laplace, and prepared to bolster Zip Zip and Rip when they moved. Kugaza immediately flew towards the crew and fucking castigated herself. The Danmaku barrage struck right at Laplace and Sentinel, heavily damaging them. Laplace attempted to use tactical simulation against the attack, but all it did was make their real position to be 6 spaces away. Rip was, well, ripped apart by the explosion along with all the hardcovers in the vicinity, shredding and exposing them until they stabilize, which they did on their turn, and Tomato Squeeze was struck by the shockwave, cooking them up while also jamming and slowing them until they stabilize, which they did on their turn, again. Also Rip got bolstered by Sentinel, but only after the rather painful failed save. And that's the entirety of the first layer. Yes, that's the whole thing. And also round 1. Round 2 began with Kugaza getting to move first. Turns out, the player move first thing only goes on first round, then it just continues like normal, but I still kinda prefer that, so I'm experimenting with the correct turn order for the session. Anyway, more Tsugamori appearing out of thin air, the shard's equivalent for Kugaza, and as she teleported to her right, a beam linked between her and Sentinel, and all the Tsugamori moved straight at the nearest players, gluing onto them like static to balloon, also shredding and impairing anyone they attached to. And also this is the point where I advise you to make a bigger map for Eidolon, not a 25×25 hex map. Laplace then scanned Kugaza yet again. They then attempted to invade her but missed. I also then decided to have the players go for another turn because it's kinda awkward to have only one NPC on my side, and as soon as I'm finished with both her turns, I kinda couldn't do anything anymore. So, Sentinel moved left, but before doing so, Laplace locked onto Kugaza with held image, shredding her thanks to Swallowtail's trait and rendering half of the layer gimmick invalid, brushed against one of the Tsugamori, causing it to attach onto them. And then consumed the lock-on before barraging at the yokai, which thanks to Laplace's spotter talent, allowed them to reroll a heavy machine gun attack that of course, fucking crit. However, this caused Kagaza to teleport away from the damage, and Sentinel was temporarily blinded by something, causing the second attack to automatically miss, but the consumption of lock-on launched an autopod attack from Rip to Kagaza, bringing them almost down to half health. And since Sentinel had a Tsugamorid attached to them, when the tiny beam became much more devastating, it hit the Tsugamorid instead, vaporizing them and causing Kagaza to lose her damage resistance for a while, which is already rendered invalid by Laplace. Kagaza teleport to the left this time as her Tsugamora Legion kept moving forward, attaching more and more of themselves to the players. A thin beam appeared on Laplace. Tomato went next, immediately got zapped by all three of the surrounding Tsugamora before dishing out pain of their own, cutting and shooting the Umbrella Yokai apart. It was at this point I realized that I should have given the Tsugamora a number on their name to know which is which. Rip also got zapped by two of the Tsugamora before activating Ramjet, boosting straight up, and throwing a war pike at Kagaza, which of course, crit again, dealing massive damage and knocking her away before she did her teleporting trick again to get even further and blind Rip as well. They then punched the shit out of the Tsugamori, knocking them away thanks to Ramjet before moving back down right next to another Tsugamori. Round 2 ended, and round 3 began with Kagaza just moving upward and casting a beam on Rip. Sentinel started a Black Thumb rodeo with the Technophile NHP controlling their mech, before deploying Accelerate onto the ground to launch further to the left, then boosted again before ending their turn. The player got to go for another turn again, so Laplace locked onto Kagaza with held image again before Rip boosted right towards their face and crit again, what the hell, destroying the second layer with the second swing of their war pike. Turns out having 4d6 damage with OP caliber, thermal charge, and momentum can be quite devastating. With nothing else to do as the Eidolon and the shards are invincible between phases, Rip did nothing after that ridiculous hit. Kagaza was now in her third layer, but you might also have noticed that this video is not remotely close to finished. Also, she doesn't have health anymore, just all the overshield in the world, keep this in mind. More Tsugamora emerged into the view as Kagaza switched to her new form. Immediately, she moved towards Sentinel, and started singing. Both Sentinel and Laplace got impaired by the singing, but since Sentinel has superior by design, that did nothing. The pilot for Sentinel, however, also got forced back in. Then, all the Tsugamoras started running away, slowly. Sentinel and Tomato tried to overwatch them, but both of them missed everything, while Rip hit with their war pike, which crit, again, but they take damage from the Tsugamora in the process, for damaging them. Tomato decided to thin out the shards, by firing their railgun. Immediately, 3 of them were down, but they also took a big damage from damaging the Tsugamora. They then launched Tracking Bug to at least figure out what Kagaza's health is, but it missed. That would not have worked either way. So yes, I broke my own rule, because I'm not my own parent either. Also, the Lancer just charged straight at Tomato, smashed the crap out of them and then invaded them to send them right on the edge. Tomato also got impaired from structure damage. Just for clarification, the main goal of the session is still to defeat the Eidolon, everything else is secondary. Laplace scanned Kagaza yet again. Then invaded her successfully, making it so that if she attacks, she gets barbecued. And then Kagaza has her turn again, for some reasons, even though she already has both her turns this round. I got really confused when she switched phase in the middle of the round. She regained her overshield yet again, slightly lower than previous turn, guess what the main factor is, and moved down towards the players, and sang yet again. This is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Also, her attack on Laplace triggered Bonded Talent from Sentinel, which got her shot by another critical hit with heavy machine gun, which didn't do as much damage as the player figured, and it also rapidly cooked her up. It would have been a very good strategy to make her exposed to take twice as much damage, but that didn't happen at all. Also, all the Tsugamora tried to move away from the player but kept close to the Eidolon once again. With all the players' turn done, the Lancer tried to overheat Tomato by invading them but failed, so they just decided to smash the crap out of them instead, which triggers core power reaction from Swallowtail that lets them teleport 3 spaces away from the shards. I'm actually not sure why they did that when they could just go here and railgun like 3 Tsugamora in one shot again, so I was really confused at that moment. Anyway, that reaction also gives Tomato damage resistance to the attack, but the Lancer doesn't give a shit. Round 3 ended, and round 4 began with Laplace handing out a leadership dice to Tomato, then invaded them to move them with Horo S1, jumped off Sentinel to get near them, which triggers a reaction called Lead the Charge on the Lancer. They also have Trample, which means anyone that gets ran over will take damage, the perfect combination of annoyance. Laplace then locked onto one of the Tsugamori, overcharged, and overheated by just one more point of heat, and used Bentham Foucault elimination on Tomato so they could take any quick action. This massive chain of events allowed Tomato to fire their railgun on 3 targets and only take out 1. Also, Laplace and Tomato are now impaired from reactor stress, because Tomato also overheated from firing the railgun. That was absolutely not worth it at all. Korgaza once again moved around and kept on singing. The sound gets worse and worse, but it also attracted Overwatch fire from Rip, who missed. Tomato has the next turn, receiving another leadership dice from Laplace to fire, and popped the core to become permanently invisible for the rest of the mission, and fired their railgun at 2 Tsugamori and the main Yukai. Both of the Tsugamori, destroyed. They also fired a vulture rifle at one of the Tsugamori, and a Nexus at the Lancer. This was to trigger Exemplar to trap the Lancer, but that didn't work, because the Lancer was more than 3 spaces away from them, and when they tried to get close, of course they just gonna run over Laplace, again. The Lancer then fired their cannon at Sentinel and Rip. Their armor and flicker field did nothing to the paracausal attack, and then trampled over Sentinel and Korgaza. The attack was enough to structure Rip 2, destroying their bulwark mods. Sentinel then used redundant systems upgrades to quick stabilize, repairing all their damage, then moved away from Korgaza, earning another trample from the Lancer in the process. Korgaza also got stepped on again. Then, they fired their heavy machine gun at a Tsugamori, which, unsurprisingly, fucking crit, and wiped it out in one shot again. Korgaza was feeling rather nervous at the moment. Her overshield was getting rather low now, but she kept on singing, dealing more and more damage to Sentinel and Rip. Rip then boosted left, threw a Warpike attack at a Tsugamori that finally didn't crit, but still destroyed it, power knuckled another one, consuming Blade Master dice for another free ram, and with Siege Ram, destroyed that one too. Then with Hunter 3, they threw their fists at the final Tsugamori, lunged towards it, ram it with Titanomichi free ram, and with Juggernaut, sent it flying straight at a hard cover, causing it to explode. Korgaza no longer has any Tsugamori. As the last unit to go, the Lancer tried to shoot at Laplace but missed. The shot at Sentinel didn't, unfortunately, dealing big damage. They then trampled over Rip and Korgaza again, and invaded Rip to impair them. Invisibility granted by flicker field seems to just not work. Overwatch attack from Laplace did hit, but the damage wasn't significant. Round 4 ended, and round 5 began with Sentinel moving away from Korgaza, locking onto them, and firing the heavy machine gun, with reroll from Laplace's spotter talent, except they are not even adjacent to each other, but at this point it's 4 hours into the session. There's a heavy storm outside threatening power outage, so I'm just going fuck it. Anyway, the heavy machine gun of course, crit again, consuming the lock-on and also triggered 2 autopods from Laplace and Rip, but it's still not enough. So, Sentinel overcharged and fired up the heavy machine gun again, receiving MP from Tomato to make sure the attack hit. It did, and the third layer was finally down. So, for the final layer of an Eidolon, the pulsing core, it's all the same. With Intercede from Bonded, Sentinel took twice the damage from the attack, but Sentinel is also a Drake. They have resistance against area attack. Even then, they still lost a structure, destroying flash anchors in the process. Another thing to note of the pulsing core, it only has 1 health. And thus, the session ended. Now let's talk about what happened. First and foremost, I think for the first time in the series, the player team has an issue of having too much support. This is like, way too much support talents for a team of 4, and most have gone unused. Leadership is a very good talent, but it's also a talent that gets worse the more a team has it, which makes sense because having more than one leader in a team is a bad idea. Spotter, Bonded, Leader, and Empath were all used to great effect in the session, but having more than one copy of the support talents is probably a bad idea, and as a result, the player doesn't have as much way in dealing effective damage. Then again, I also did pick one of the more damage sponge layers, and also threw in a goddamn exotic ultra as a distraction. Speaking of the Lancer, I threw them in because I have been waiting for a chance to reveal this gag for a very, very long while, but I seriously do not advise you to add a surprise NPC into the session, and if you decided to do so anyway, don't add a goddamn ultra into the fight. And, as a final word on Eidolon, you definitely don't want the player to frequently fight it. The Eidolon is meant to be the final puzzle boss that is intentionally designed to bend the rules over its knee, but its mysterious nature won't work if you have your players constantly fight it, as they will figure out its pattern soon enough. I advise you to use it as the final fight of a major story arc, a crazy boss that tops everything the players have fought before. As for the players' performance, if it wasn't for Laplace, I don't think this session would have gone as smoothly. Their constant scanning was needed to quickly figure out the Eidolon's weakness, and the support they provided via lock-on, leader dices, and spotter shenanigans proved to be very helpful in aiding others dealing more consistent damage. Swallowtail's trait with lock-on even rendered the gimmick of second layer core Gaza to be almost pointless, and had they continued to cook her up, her third layer gimmick might be rendered pointless too. The one keeping Laplace alive however is Sentinel unto Eternity, with their massive bulk, Argonaut shield, bonded talent, and also carrying them around with mule harness. Their massive 30 health bar was proven to be very reliable in keeping them alive even when everything else failed, and besides all that, they still had a heavy machine gun to deal a shit ton of damage with. Both Tomato Squeeze and Zip Zip and Rip are focused on damage dealing instead. Tomato was able to use their railgun to its maximum effectiveness by shooting out tons of shards in one go, but Rip was absolutely ridiculous with their warpike that almost always dealt a ridiculous amount of damage thanks to all the bonus damage stacking. And combined with Titanomachi, Duelist, Ramjet, and Siege Ram, they also has all the knockback to play around too. It's no wonder they dealt the top damage in this entire session. Anyway, that's all for this episode. Hope you guys enjoy the absolute ridiculousness of this episode, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.